I'm watching commentator.
Diving grab over the shoulder. What a catch.
Touchdown! Wow. Allen Robinson on the left side of the end zone comes up with a score.
All right, now this is how we like to welcome special guests to the show. We just show their amazing highlights, and then they feel really great about themselves. Allen Robinson joining us today. So glad to have you, my friend. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. He's not here to be interviewed. You're an analyst on this show. We can't wait to hear your takes. Somebody who's very close to the league, of course. We have Kimberly Martin here as well, and we've got a lot to get to with her. Also, Field Yates and Mina Kimes. Guys, there's a lot to get into today, so let's go ahead and get to it. NFL Live wasn't on the air last week, so we need to discuss all of this happening with the Steelers and Dolphins trade. Aaron Rodgers, you can see him working out with the Steelers wideouts in Malibu. More on that a little bit later, but let's take you back to this Steelers-Dolphins deal. Pittsburgh acquiring Jalen Ramsey, who has the third most pass breakups since 2016. We knew he wasn't going to stay in Miami. Now we know where he goes. Steelers also got Jonnu Smith, who tied a career high with 8 touchdowns last season. Mark Andrews was the only tight end with more. And in return, Minkah Fitzpatrick is now a Dolphin. Since 2016, the only DBs named first-team All-Pro 3 times, Jalen Ramsey and Minkah Fitzpatrick. All right, here's a little more from Ryan Clark, our colleague, connecting with the greats. One Steelers legend and the next. You see Troy Polamalu and Jalen Ramsey on a little FaceTime there. I love that. Good facilitation there by RC. He lets that stuff happen. I got to get to it. All right, now let's get right to work here with Allen. Does this addition make sense to you from the Steelers side of things specifically?
Definitely. I think it's a great addition. I mean, whenever you can add a player like Jalen Ramsey into the mix, he's very versatile in the secondary. He can play corner. He can play nickel. He can play safety. So for him, being able to be involved in the mix when you're going against T. Higgins and the Jamar Chases of the world, I think being able to have a player who can directly impact guarding them and also blitzing and being able to be a very physical player for them.
Important points here, Laura, but the versatility of Jalen Ramsey, I think, is an important part of this trade. And let's also acknowledge that the Steelers are extremely confident they're landing not just a very good player, but still an elite player, because Jalen Ramsey was paid by Miami on a new deal last September that put him right at the top of the cornerback market. Part of this trade also involves Jalen Ramsey getting a raise from Pittsburgh, Laura, an extra $1.5 million, as reported by Adam Schefter in this deal. So the Steelers feel as though Jalen Ramsey can be a player that, even if on paper they already feel set at perimeter corner with Joey Porter Jr. and also Darius Slay, acquired earlier this offseason, Ramsey's versatility is enough that they can just say, we'll figure out on the fly where he best fits for us. If you go back to his days with the Los Angeles Rams, he played a ton of slot corner for them, kind of that big nickel spot as well within that scheme. And if you go all the way back to his days at Florida State in college, Mina, this is a player who has played safety, corner, nickel, you kind of name it. Jalen Ramsey brings a little bit of everything to the table.
Man, he was such a good college prospect. People forget about that sometimes. Reflected, of course, in where he was drafted. Look, Jalen Ramsey is not exactly the same corner he was 5-6 years ago, going back to Jacksonville. But he's still really talented, I think, at a couple of things that Pittsburgh needs. And Allen hit on it when you talked about how physical he is. He is still one of the best tacklers.
Keane knocked it on into
He can guard tight ends.
Garrick.
In the middle of the field, he's tough. And I think when you think about the Steelers and the team that's given them
stretching out that knee.
Here in particular, that's the Baltimore
For the moment, he's feeling good.
The problem
It's 12. Grant would have good sign. Bullimore on now for man.
Physicality will be useful. I do think that ability to handle tight ends is useful against that particular team. So to me, this feels very calculated. You know, when you see these player-for-player trades, you have a team like Pittsburgh. Obviously, they saw something in Ramsey in particular that they wanted. And when you think about their opponents, it makes sense.
Yeah, Mina touched on it. He's not the same guy. But they don't necessarily need him to be the same guy. You don't need Jalen Ramsey to come in and say, okay, be a lockdown corner like you've been in the past. He is physical. He's a ball hawk. But when I cover the Steelers so much, and you look at the defense, but behind, it's the depth for me that I like this move. I like adding, it seems like the Steelers are all in. Whether you agree with the moves, you agree with the quarterback, the Steelers as a franchise, they are telling you we are all in, and they're making the moves to prove it. The big question to me is the TJ Watt of it all. I'm not concerned yet. I'll be concerned if we're inching closer to week 1 and he's not on the field. But Aaron Rodgers has said when we get TJ in the fold, things will be good. and I think they know that they're going to have TJ. So you add Jalen Ramsey, you add TJ in the mix. I like this group.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. TJ Watt, I mean, you can't really think about the Steelers' defense of late past few years and not think about it. What do you think about how they should handle the TJ Watt situation and getting that deal done?
You know, I think for them, their defense is based around the front seven, and TJ is a huge part of that, you know. So I don't think you get the benefits of having a player like Jalen on the back end without a TJ Watt. So I think whenever you can have a guy like that on the field to continue to bring pressure and add to that front seven, I think having Jalen, you know, would just make things so much better.
Yeah, there's no doubt he is the heart and soul of that team in so many ways. All right, let's talk about the Jonnu Smith side of this trade. One thing to watch with the Steelers' offense, the use of 2 tight ends. Since 2020, Aaron Rodgers has hovered around the top 10 in total dropbacks and completions, but has the 5th most pass touchdowns in 2 tight end formations. Steelers utilized it last season in their highest rate since 2014, and then now they add another tight end in Jonnu Smith. Alan, what do you make of Smith's addition, specifically how it fits in this scheme, what they may want to do with Rodgers?
You know, I think it's a phenomenal addition. Not only with just Aaron Rodgers, but also Arthur Smith, you know. So I think with those two parties really liking to have 2 tight end sets, I think being able to bring him in with Pat Freiermuth, I think makes their offense very dynamic. Obviously, they added DK Metcalf as well this offseason. So, again, being able to add somebody who's coming off a Pro Bowl season, who has the familiarity with the Arthur Smith, you know, I think it starts to be able to add some cohesiveness to their offense as they're getting in new additions. You know, it also is some familiar faces.
How about 3 tight ends, Alan? Because I really think this team's going to live in 13 personnel, right? Because all the tight ends fit together. You mentioned Freiermuth. To me, he is more of he can stretch the seam. You can use him vertically. Darnell Washington's basically a 6th offensive lineman, I realize, but he's the blocker. And then Jonnu Smith, to Alan's point, he's working underneath. He's getting you yards after the catch. You can elevate the screen game with him. Aaron Rodgers has another outlet if the ball's coming out quickly. I like how these 3 tight ends fit together, and he's absolutely right. Arthur Smith absolutely loves this grouping. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a ton of it in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Steelers side of this so far, but Kimberly, I'm curious, did the Dolphins get better with this trade last week? Because there have been some people who have wondered about the Dolphins side of things.
Laura, yeah, I'm one of them. You know, I think this is a little bit of a head scratcher because as we talked about with the Jalen Ramsey of it all, talked about the physicality, and that's the type of player that they're moving on from. When I look at the Dolphins, one of the things that we've said year after year is this team just doesn't seem to be physically tough. Not my words. Opponents have said that the same. And so when I look at the Dolphins, I just wonder what the direction is for this team. Even the Darren Waller move, you know, that's a guy who hasn't played in a minute. So I'm not sure what the Dolphins are. Perhaps Field, Mina, perhaps you guys have a better read on them, because to me this is a total wait and see, because I'm not sure what Miami is thinking.
Well, Darren Waller did nearly make my Spotify Wrapped list this past year because I'm a big fan of his music, but I too was confused by the addition. You know, here's the thing about this move from the Miami side. I think in a vacuum, if a team trades 2 players that weren't likely long for the franchise for a player in Minkah Fitzpatrick, who has been a 3-time All-Pro, who has not been at the peak of his powers the past couple of years, but is younger and is under decent contract control for the next few years, I'm okay with it. The issue I have with Miami kind of gets to what Kimberly was referring to, which is that they've made a handful of big bets over the past few years, whether it's trades or extensions or trades that led to extensions, a la Bradley Chubb, a deal that has not worked out. The Tyreek Hill extension, which, you know, 1 season into it looked like perhaps, you know, a mistake on Miami's part. We'll see if he bounces back this season. Jalen Ramsey as well, extended in September, now traded in July, Mina. It just feels like this is a team whose football business is often mediocre, and that's why one of the reasons why I think this team might be kind of heading towards the middle in the AFC as opposed to competing in the playoffs.
Yeah, finances clearly played a role in this. And if you want to say one nice thing about Miami, getting the contract off the books, not having to eat it was, honestly, I was a little bit surprised they managed to do that. So that's a bit of a win. But, you know, Kimberly, you're right. The secondary has major problems. I have to think they're going to add another corner because as it stands, it's probably the weakest cornerback group in the NFL right now. There's still a few free agents out there. Asante Samuel Jr., Stephon Gilmore, names that come to mind as potential guys they could sign. Russell Douglas from Buffalo. And then Mike Hilton in the slot. But, you know, this would be just like a 1-year fire type deal. And you're really counting on that front 7, that pass rush.
Yeah, I think all of this, leads to the points that we're making. But the Dolphins have missed the playoffs in 6 of the last 8 seasons. They haven't won a playoff game since 2000. Alan, when you look at a team like this, that at times we've been like, oh, the Dolphins are exciting and their offense has been super exciting. What do you think about them now going into next season?
It's tough. For them, they've lost a lot on defense, but as well as if you do want to start with a building block, bringing somebody in like Minka, who's a very good locker room and culture guy, I think may start to shape things and move it in a direction a little bit. He's going to come to work each and every day. He's a hard-nosed player. He's a physical player. So I think he can maybe help establish a little bit of identity on the defensive side of the ball and kind of rally the guys around him.
That's a great point. Mike McDaniel would tell you their goal has been to avoid those December slumps. That's when they've fallen off.
Moving from pick 5 to pick 2 because you're the one we've been hunting up. Yes, sir. That's the best decision.
Jacksonville made the biggest trade in this year's draft, leapfrogging up the board to the number 2 overall pick. And now the player they selected, Travis Hunter, is trying to make his own big move by becoming the first two-way NFL player since his former college head coach, Deion Sanders.
Off and left, looking for Sanders. Touchdown, Deion Sanders.
This is just so rare. But then again, so are the talents of Hunter, who's being onboarded in Jacksonville as a wide receiver, but also will be used at times at cornerback.
In the pros, it's going to be the same way for me, but I don't have schoolwork, so I can go my 24 hours and nothing but football.
It's what Hunter did at Colorado last season.
Touchdown, the best player in college football.
When he played 1,481 total snaps, nearly 300 more than any other player in college football. And if Hunter is used enough on both sides of the football in Jacksonville, and the Jaguars are open to using him in the most effective ways, then he will do things that no one has seen for years.
Celebrate like it's
1996.
Back in 1996, Deion Sanders became the last NFL player with at least 8 starts on both offense and defense in the same season.
Deion playing both ways this year. He's been out only 4 plays all night.
Before him, Don Hutson shined and still remains the only player in NFL history with 400 career receptions and 10 interceptions. Following their two-way careers, both Hutson and Deion wound up in Canton in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now Hunter is starting his own two-way journey in a way that today only he can.
Woo, okay. Travis Hunter didn't just play both sides of the ball last season. He excelled at it. 86% of Colorado's snaps on offense finished tied for second in the FBS in touchdown grabs. 83% of Colorado's snaps on defense he played, finishing third in the Big 12 in interceptions. There's no doubt he was excellent on both sides of the ball. There's a reason why he was the number 2 overall pick in the draft. But Field, you did extensive video work on Hunter leading up to the draft. How do you see his reps actually being split at this next level?
Yeah, Laura, to me, there's a path to an all-pro player on either side of the ball. I actually think the ceiling is slightly higher as a wide receiver, which is to take nothing away from his defensive efforts. And Adam mentioned how the team is onboarding him in offense or on the offensive side of the ball during OTAs, which is at least in part because their GM, James Gladstone, talked about how instinctive he is as a defensive player. And so if you told me Travis Hunter is going to play a slightly larger share of snaps on one side of the ball or the other, to me, it would be logical if this team leans to the cornerback side because he can just basically go off of instincts and not have to go through the meetings process as extensively during the week. I think my cold take on Travis Hunter has been kind of consistent since the months leading up to the draft. I think it's going to be one of those things that the team figures out along the way. If there are certain weeks where they need him to be playing more wide receiver than defensive back, they can do so. But because of how unique this player is, Alan, it might be something that just kind of changes on the fly.
I agree, but at the same time, being able to get adjusted to the physicality of the NFL, I think that can be a challenge. Also, when you're talking about people who are masters of crafts at this level and guys who are playing on Sundays, you're playing against guys who are great route runners, not just good route runners, but great route runners. You're talking about you're playing against corners who are great in press coverage like your Jalen Ramseys of the world. So being able to get adjusted to that, and also, again, you have to tackle Derrick Henry's coming out of the backfield. So that's a lot to ask for a guy playing an extensive amount of snaps on Sundays. And as a person who's played in Duval, I know how hot it can get down there, so it can be challenging at times.
So, Alan, here's what I love about football players. I love that you guys, so confident, come into the league thinking, yeah, I could do anything. I love that. Here's my caution. Here's my caution for Travis Hunter. Because I remember since the combine, and he talked about, yeah, I could do it all. My only caution is temper the expectations just a little bit, because I think he could be a phenomenal corner in the NFL personally. But the NFL is different. It's not college. What you're able to do, these guys on opposite you, they get paid just as much money to stop you from doing whatever it is that you want to do. He's got tremendous instincts, but the season is longer. The guys across from you are just as big, just as physical. And so to me, I think packages are cool, but I just want him to sort of temper the expectations, because if he thinks, oh, I can be this great player that I was in college, I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed, because it's just not that simple.
Yeah, it's interesting because even some of the players that you talk to are actually excited. They respect his film. They respect his abilities. But then there's also the side of, you're not going to be able to do this at the next level. So I can't wait to see how it plays out. And Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce, by the way, had an interesting thought about how teams may try to make Hunter really work on every defensive rep.
If he plays corner, they're going to run deep balls at him all day. They're going to run the wide receivers, just take off on him all day just to try and get him tired.
Yeah.
I'm like, why wouldn't you just attack him that way?
You buying that logic, Mina?
I think there's something to it. I love the gamesmanship aspect of this, and it's cool to hear from Travis. But he highlights, I think, what is going to be an issue with Travis if they try to play him both ways. Offensively, they have more control, right, over how he is deployed. But defense is inherently reactive. And the Jacks can say, okay, we're only going to play him on third downs, maybe outside or in certain situations. But invariably, he is going to have to prepare, and Alan alluded to this, for the tendencies of different wide receivers, for the different ways offenses will attack them. That's a lot to put on the shoulders of a young player, and is why I have a little bit of hesitation about the two-ways experiment, because there is a lot of craft and preparation that goes into both sides. And on defense, I think Travis is onto something there in terms of the way offenses might attack him.
Mina, the one last dynamic I wanted to bring up that I'm not sure has been mentioned enough is that the head coach is, of course, Liam Cohen, and he's an offensive guy, and he may not be able to help himself. And he may say, I want Brian Thomas Jr. and I want Travis Hunter lining up opposite each other for 95% of the game.
Yeah, I mean, Alan, that's the other thing. We were kind of talking about this in the commercial break, too. Like, for Trevor Lawrence, you may want as many possible dynamic options out there. You got to think Travis Hunter plays into that as well offensively.
Definitely, and having him alongside Brian Thomas, I think just helps them offensively. Again, with Liam Cohen coming in, we know the kind of offense that he likes to run. In Tampa, he had Mike Evans, he had Chris Godwin. So being able to deploy two good receivers out there, I think that will play hand in hand as far as what Travis Hunter wants to do as well.
One of the most interesting storylines, certainly, to keep an eye on. Now to something that has been heavy with all of us as we've seen the devastating flooding in Central Texas over the July 4th weekend. It's left at least 90 people dead, including 27 children and counselors from one summer camp alone. The search continues for other victims of the disaster, with more rain in the forecast for parts of the state. There have been more than 850 high water rescues so far. The NFL Foundation, alongside the Texans and Cowboys, have come together to donate $1.5 million to provide both immediate assistance as well as long-term resources to communities impacted by the flooding. Our thoughts are with everyone dealing with this tragedy. Still to come here on NFL Live, Sean McVay, Mike Tomlin, and Dan Campbell may have more in common than you think. And Allen's actually played for all three. He'll take us inside their locker rooms. You don't want to miss this inside scoop. He calls one of them a mad scientist. You'll find out who next.
Let's roll, get it. King Henry, the name just fits him well.
Touchdown for the King!
He's a hell of a player, and I said that how blessed he is to do some of the things he's capable of.
No one's ever done this. The King's in midfield and rolling. He's going to go! Touchdown!
I can't give him credit enough for how dynamic he is.
Talk about some running backs, okay? A new article out on ESPN.com this morning. Jeremy Fowler polled NFL executives, scouts, and coaches in order to rank the top 10 players at each position. So we're going to start off with the running backs. No surprise, top of the list. Super Bowl champion Saquon Barkley leads the way. Behind him, Derrick Henry, who ranked 9th on this list last year, by the way. You see the work that he's done to improve his status with the Ravens. Christian McCaffrey played 4 games last season, falls from 1st to 5th on the list. James Cook, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara rounding out the top 10. All of them were honorable mention in 2024. So now's the time. We see a list. We got to do a gripe with the list. Field, what's your biggest issue with this list?
Yeah, Laura, I'm here to do exactly that. If you're out there right now and you're the voter that decided that Bijan Robinson wasn't even good enough to find his way into your top 10, we need to talk. Why? I'm not quite sure what person's rationale would be to not include a player who I really think is a zero-weakness running back. There are myriad of ways in which we can describe the brilliance of Bijan Robinson. I'm not sure there's a player right now in the NFL who is better at making defenders miss in the hole. And what looks like an unblocked run might turn into a big gain with Bijan Robinson because of how nifty and powerful and agile he is with the ball in his hands. He can certainly impact the game in the passing game as well, Laura. So to not have him inside the top 10, I'm going to hope that is merely somebody having a summer slip where they forget about Bijan Robinson, because there's no argument for him not being a top 10 player at that spot.
I saw a theory online, maybe he accidentally wrote Brian Robinson or something, and who amongst us doesn't know someone who hasn't accidentally drafted Brian, who's a good player, by the way. I feel bad, but he is no Bijan. I thought that Bucky Irving should have cracked the top 10, and maybe that's because I've been watching Bucky Irving tape over the last few weeks, but he was unbelievable in the second half of last season. In fact, from week 8 on, he was actually the best running back in football in EPA per play. I think once the Bucs and Liam Cohen, their offensive coordinator, really built that run game, or evolved it, to being more of a gap scheme, which caters to his skill sets. He's got such great vision, the suddenness, the burst, all of which we saw at Oregon. It really took off, and I think he's in a position to succeed next year as well, because this offensive line, quietly one of the best lines in football, so he's primed to have another great season.
Yeah, I think something we need to start talking about more is how good the Bucs might be next year. That's something to pencil in for later on in the summer on NFL Live. Field, is there a guy on this running back list that you think will end up on the list next season that's not there now?
Yeah, Laura, every once in a while, you got to grab the low-hanging fruit, right? And that's what Ashton Jeanty making his way onto that list next year would be, right? A player who ended up being drafted 6th overall in this incredibly deep running back class in this year's draft. But again, I use the term zero-weakness player for Bijan Robinson. One of the comps that came up during the pre-draft process for Ashton Jeanty was Bijan, because like him, there's nothing he can't do, right? He was such an effective runner of the football. He's got incredible contact balance. The part that was not discussed as much during the pre-draft process is that 2 years ago, Ashton Jeanty led all FBS running backs in receiving yards as well, with 567. So again, the Raiders should not have drafted a player 6th overall that they don't plan to rely heavily on all the time. Mina, wouldn't be a surprise if Ashton Jeanty has a massive, massive season.
All right, you took the lowest hanging fruit. I'm going to take the second lowest hanging fruit and go with Marion Hampton, who was the running back taken next in the draft. But they went 1-2 for a reason, Field. I mean, in many drafts, Hampton would have been the #1 back overall for a variety of reasons. Starting with, he's just so complete. You're seeing it here on tape. He really has great combination of size, speed, contact balance. I think he's scheme agnostic. He's good with the ball in his hands, too. He can pass protect. And perhaps most importantly, he lands in a situation with the Chargers where they're going to use him a lot. Jim Harbaugh's made no secret about his desire to run the ball. I think the biggest variable to me is the interior of that Chargers offensive line. Go out, you get Mekhi Becton, whether or not they can block better. If there's some improvement there, though, I think Hampton will flourish.
I see you, too, with your low-hanging fruit, but I agree. They're going to be great running backs to watch next season. All right, let's get back to our special guest today, Allen Robinson in the house. And look at this. We put together some of the more notable teams that he's played for already in what's been a great career. You see the Steelers right there in the middle, the Rams. You've got the Detroit Lions on the right. So, Allen, you've played for some notable coaches in recent years. 2022, after the Rams, you were with them under Sean McVay, a year after their Super Bowl win. A year later, 2023, you find yourself in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin, another winning season, a trip to the wild card round, and then last season with the Lions under Dan Campbell, a team that set a franchise record with 15 wins in Campbell's 4th season. Special season to be with that team. So what a list. It's, dude, super impressive, first of all. Let's talk through each of these guys, because it's rare to get an inside scoop onto all 3 of them. Some of the best coaches in the league. Let's talk about Sean McVay first. What makes him so special?
You know, Coach McVay is kind of like a mad scientist. I think he's really transcended the offenses to where they're at now, and a lot of teams are chasing that. When you see the different variations of motions, when you see the different formations, the bunches, the stacks, I think he's really set himself aside and put himself in a league of his own. You know, and you see a lot of different people, you know, trying to really chase that with the different motions and stuff.
Okay, so give us like a story sometime where you were thinking, this dude really is a mad scientist. He's on the board doing the stuff. His recall's crazy. Like, do you have anything like that?
Definitely. When you hear him recall different teams and different player tendencies, and also I remember during training camp, right after a practice, he's sending me clips already of different plays and stuff, you know. So for him, his recall of plays and what's going on and player tendencies is on a level that I haven't seen before.
Wow.
All right, so Alan, as you know, cover the Steelers, cover the AFC North a lot. I want to go from the mad scientist to the great orator, which is Mike Tomlin.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you and I have talked before games about what makes Mike Tomlin so special. And I remember one of the things you said to me was Mike Tomlin kind of takes the air out of things as far as not letting it get too big. Why is he able to instill that kind of confidence in you guys? What is he saying in those team meetings that the distractions don't matter?
He's able to motivate the guys and be able to keep football so simple and put guys in position to do what they do well. From what I've saw, we've had times where we had injuries and we were banged up in the secondary, and we were bringing in guys who hadn't been on a roster all year and would come in and make plays just based on him putting guys in position and allowing them to do what they do very successfully.
Wait, one of the quotes that we've heard a lot from him is, we want volunteers, not hostages. There's some amazing Tomlinisms that stick out to me. What's your favorite?
Cut your eyelids off. Cut your eyelids off.
How often was he saying that?
He would say that a lot, you know, and not only does he say that, but he puts it in perspective as far as what will happen during the game. You know, I remember when we were playing against the Los Angeles Rams, and he was telling us how much the special teams were going to be involved that week, and he told the rushers, you know, just continue to rush, pin your ears back, and do not let up, and that kicker is going to miss a kick. And sure enough, we went into that game, and it was an impactful play in the game, and the kicker missed it, you know. But when you see things like that he speaks of during the course of the week, and when you see it come into fruition on Sundays, and it happened time and time and time again, at that point, you know, whatever he says, guys are believing it.
Really fast, what do you think cut your eyelids off means? I'm just thinking of like the physical.
Don't blink.
Don't blink.
Blink.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay.
Run to it. Can I just say, with the AFC North, those games, players always tell me, like, those weeks, when it's AFC North week, those battles in your division, Tomlin's on a whole different level. Is there anything that surprised you about Tomlin in the time that you were in Pittsburgh?
No, not at all. Well, I mean, he's just such a detail-oriented guy as well. You know, I mean, for me, fortunately, being able to play for Coach McVay, Coach Campbell, and Coach Tomlin, they're all very detail-oriented. But, you know, when the going gets tough and when the stakes are at its highest, you see coaches like Coach Tomlin and Coach Campbell and also Coach McVay, you know, they're also at their best. You know, I remember, again, going into Seattle week, it was a week that we were going on the road into a hostile environment, you know, and normally we have a player-driven meet at around 7 a.m. You know, Coach Tomlin shot us a text. Today we're meeting at 6.
Oof.
You know, so for him, and as soon as you get there, he says, you know, it's nothing special. I just was so excited going into this game week, playing at Seattle, a hostile environment, a game that we had to win. He was like, man, I couldn't wait to see you guys at 7. I wanted to see you at 6.
I love it. That's a big difference, too, by the way. It changed everything. All right, now, Dan Campbell is the other big-time coach that Alan played for. On the other side of this break, we'll talk a lot more about him, something that you may not know about him. You know, there's that whole bite the kneecaps off thing, but there's a lot more depth, and Alan will tell you why. Also, what you should expect for the Lions next season. We got the inside scoop from somebody who just played for them. We'll be right back. So glad you're with us on NFL Live today. Let's talk Lions. They lost in the playoffs to the Commanders. Of course, Detroit was trailing by 10 in the fourth quarter, and they tried the trick play with wideout Jamison Williams throwing deep to Jahmyr Gibbs. It was intercepted. Commanders end up punching it in for a touchdown to go up 45-28, punching their ticket to the NFC Championship game. You see Dan Campbell's face there. Definitely disappointed. It was a team that we loved all season long. Injuries had a lot to do with the way the season finished. But Mina, quick look back to that playoff loss. How can Detroit avoid that situation this season?
Well, Jaden Daniels is not a quarterback you want to blitz as much as they did. They blitzed him 55% of the time, and he diced it up, completing 75% of passes for 191 yards and a touchdown. That's who he was all year, by the way. He was unbelievable against the blitz. And the Lions were backed into a corner because they ran out of players, so they felt that they had to send pressure constantly to have a fighting chance. To me, this is going to be the difference, or potentially the difference next year, especially if they play this team and this quarterback again. Can you get pressure with 4? Can your secondary healthier, buy your front some time, even if your pass rush isn't better? Maybe situationally you can put them in a better situation to get after the quarterback. They cannot blitz to the degree that they did last year. They know that it was out of necessity.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the health, but then also changes they can make to what they would do schematically. Now, according to ESPN Analytics, the Lions have the second best shot to make the Super Bowl in the NFC, behind the defending champion Eagles. The Lions have ended a lot of droughts in recent years, but they've never made a Super Bowl. Their last NFL championship game was in 1957. Kimberly, as we spin ahead to this season, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for Detroit? Because there have been some changes, especially coaching staff-wise.
So, I think that's the biggest question mark for me, the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. Ben Johnson, you mentioned mad scientist with Sean McVay. Like, Ben Johnson is a guy who enjoyed just being in his room scheming up stuff. Like, players like Jahmyr Gibbs would talk about each week, what does he have for us? What are we going to whip out? So losing that, but also Aaron Glenn, who had been there from the beginning. The leadership now is obviously the Jets head coach. That foundation, but also, Laura, I was there. Alan, too, I was there when they lost to the 49ers, and then I was there last year, losing to the Commanders. So, like, back-to-back, you know, in recent memory, we see a team that's right there on the precipice of, all these expectations, and then a fall short. I think that they also have to overcome as well.
First of all, Kimberly, I just got a text message from Dan Campbell. You've been banned from all future Lions playoffs games, so it's no longer your fault.
Not a Kim curse.
I'm kidding, of course. However, the Kim curse alive and well. You know, to me, it really is all about the offensive coordinator here in John Morton. And that's not to take anything away from Aaron Glenn, who was, you know, along with Ben Johnson, the most coveted head coaching candidate this past offseason. More so the fact that a defensive coordinator over the course of the game might throw out, you know, 15 different calls, maybe 20 different defensive play calls in the course of a game. Whereas if you play 75 offensive snaps, you might be running 60 or 65 different offensive plays with some small wrinkles here or there. And it's the marriage between John Morton, who has only been a coordinator for one time and one season in the NFL previously with the Jets back in 2017 under Todd Bowles, that he has with Jared Goff. It's a quarterback-driven league, but not too far behind that is the relationship the quarterback has with his play caller, Jared Goff, and Ben Johnson, amongst the best relationships over the past few years.
And it is tough losing 2 coordinators, but at the same time, I think for Detroit, the foundation has been built. You know, they have the veterans in the locker room. You have your Amon-Ra St. Browns. You have your Jared Goffs. And now being able to match up some of that youth with the veterans and with the foundation that you have built. You have the Jahmyr Gibbs, the Jameson Williamson. So I think this year they will be able to lean on those younger guys a little bit more as they're now going into year 3, going into year 4, and have that experience. And, you know, these aren't just your average young players. These are Pro Bowl and more caliber type players. So being able to see Jahmyr Gibbs maybe get some more carries this year, seeing Jameson Williams get some more touches, because, again, I mean, those guys to me are like 2 Ferraris that have been lightning driven.
Yep, I love it. That's a good one. Now, the other thing, too, that I sort of lean back on when thinking about positively for the Lions is that Dan Campbell's there. And you mentioned that foundation. Having played for him, what is he like, and what are some things that you take away from him?
As much as he preaches physicality and grit, he's such a detail-oriented coach. You know, that's split-wise on offense. That's defense. Okay, what are we running? Are we in man-to-man? What's our leverage? Staying true to those leverages. And any meeting that you get in with Coach Campbell, offense or defensive, you know, he's going to preach as far as what he believes are going to be the things that are going to help you win the game. And he's going to be so detailed in that approach throughout the course of the week. And every time you line up in practice, he's going to make sure that everybody is on their P's and Q's when it comes to the detail of the operation.
And you see how that detail has affected the way that it's looked on the field. I mean, definitely a team that we loved last season. All right, still ahead on NFL Live. There's something here that may not make a whole lot of sense right this second, why this box score has to do with NFL Live, but we're going to explain it next. You see Allen Robinson highlighted on the screen there. We're going to tell you all about this, and you don't want to miss it next on ESPN. Big tease there, okay? He's going to be here tomorrow, too, by the way. Allen Robinson played Week 6 game with an ankle injury, finishing with 4 receptions and a team-high 53 yards. Allen's a tough cookie. Allen, I'm playing hurt, too, this week. That guy on the right side of the screen, Jack Rutledge, took me down. I was chasing him, and apparently I'm older than I thought I was, and I have a bum ankle. I've been hiding it today, but look how stupid this is. So, Alan, how did you play that well? I need some advice because
ankle injuries are no fun. No fun. Game ready, acupuncture.
I didn't have any of that.
But she taped up,
taped up,
ready, show, all good.
Well, you can't even tell. Oh, there you go. Yeah, see? Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Alan